Hey everyone, welcome to Flash Cycle, a webinar dedicated to all things sterile processing. I'm Clayton, and I'll be your guide as we discuss the newest trends and technologies and have conversations with leaders in the industry about their personal journeys. Join us today as we dive right into the world of sterile processing.
Everyone, how you guys doing today?
Doing good.
Awesome.
Doing great.
Well, today I'll kind of dive right in. We are going to be talking and discussing about PPE and quality events. I got a couple friends here today, Kristi, Shane, and Mark. All have experience in sterile processing. Shane's been a manager. He's managed for over 2 years. Kristi has held a variety of roles across 3 facilities herself. Mark, I know you have an extensive SPD experience. I know you've kind of been on the side of materials too, so you have a interesting point of view. We're all glad to have you guys on today, and we will dive right in.
Perfect.
I think one of the best ways that we had to prevent quality events is doing quality audits. We had regular peer audits where if someone was putting together a tray, they would come over and audit it before they put it in a pan, or they would go and pop open a tray and audit that. And they had to do so many every day so that there were different points of every point of assembly and sterilization that were getting audited. And if someone did have an event, it was brought back to them and they were talked to about it, make sure that it didn't keep happening.
Right. No, that's great. What sort of results did you see after you guys implemented some of the auditing? You noticed that
they definitely started going down when you know that there's a possibility that somebody's going to be looking at your tray and double checking and making sure that everything is there and everything is correct. You're going to pay a little bit closer attention.
Yeah. Awesome. Shane, as a manager, did you guys do something similar to that? What did you guys do at your facility?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most aggravating quality events that you could have would be like missing locks on a rigid container. And so just when whoever was unloading that sterilizer load to put on the shelf, they had to audit to those locks to make sure that they were there, so that it didn't make it to the OR. And, we didn't have that sort of quality event.
Yeah, some of the locks on rigid containers are frustrating. Some of that low-hanging fruit. I used to tell staff all the time, even as you walk through, your sterile core, to kind of keep your head on a swivel for those things, the busted tape and the locks. Those are kind of easy ones to capture. Mark, in your experience, what kind of processes would you take to kind of make sure that the audits that were taking place were kind of done the correct way? And then what did you do with that information?
Yeah, so much like Shane alluded to, we would only allow, supervisors, managers, and above to review every cart full of instruments before it was sent to a sterile area. So locks, filters, all the proper external indicators, looking at the tape, like you said, all those things you see just at a glance. And then they would need to initial that tray before it went up. So if we ever had an issue with the tray and it wasn't initialed, we needed to follow up with the person that was responsible for sterilizing that tray. And then going a few steps back in the process, we had people with number of zip ties in decontam. So every tray they did, because we didn't have the best way of tracking it, they zip tied the trays that they did. So as it came to the clean side, if there was an issue with it being dirty or maybe something wasn't taken apart and properly cleaned, there was the ability to do follow-up education. So bringing accountability, not necessarily to punitive measures, but with the right opportunities to educate and train them on taking apart that kerosene or, looking at that vendor tray in a different way than you look at the normal trays, things like that.
Right. No, I'm glad you said that. These things aren't always to be punitive, but just to bring awareness and to get better, right? So I think as leaders, we take that approach, hey, this is what we found. Let's get this right next time together. And I always, as a supervisor, I always like to get the feedback of what potentially what an obstacle was to not get this right the first time. Let's say you're getting a tray on the assembly side, and somebody did send it through, and then that kerosene run drawer wasn't taken apart. Was it was there a malfunction on the instrument? What was the process there, and like how do we get things right next time is super important. So, like you said, it's not always punitive, but it could be potentially life saving to make sure that we get these things right. Definitely appreciate all the feedback on that one. We got a couple questions that we'll go over after this too. Hey Shane, I'd like you to take the lead on this one. You kind of alluded to it last time on our last question. So if I'm a tech at your facility and I'm in decon for the day, and I first get a case part and I notice that something is off. Maybe I see some sharps are in my instrument set, or I'm missing some instruments. What approach would I take? Would I grab a lead at that point? Would I just work through it and put a tag in it? What sort of things do you guys do at your facility?
Yeah, definitely. Speaking on sharps, that's a notifiable event. We're going to notify the supervisor of the lead, and then we're going to notify the OR room that came from, so that the scrub tech can be reminded that it's important to remove those sharps from the tray. Same with point of use. If there's no point of use spraying or wipe downs, those would be notified as well.
Yeah.
And it's just, training the team to recognize, and respond appropriately. The other side of that coin is if we're notified of a quality issue, we're a customer service department. We maintain, good composure. We respond to the customer with, how can I help you? What can I get for you and replace? We don't get mad or agitated.
No, I like that you brought that up, because that's a really important thing. Is the collaboration piece with the OR and SPD, and keeping your head cool and not really kind of letting things get too overwhelming for you is a big element to it. Mark, can you talk a little bit about some of your experience with collaboration with the OR? What you would hope that would look like, and what some approaches like Shane was talking about. We just found a quality event. Let's say we found some sharps in our tray. Like, what's the process you would take to kind of bring in the OR? Like Shane said, remind them, hey, this is something we want to kind of shore up next time.
Yeah. So you want it to be collaborative, right? It's not punitive. It's not about getting people in trouble. It's about keeping everybody safe, and our patients safe, and our employees safe, and providing that high level of customer service. So just as we would expect to provide them with a great product, that's how we want it back as well. So in a case of a sharp showing up in decontam or something, we want to document it so that we have the right proof, the right information, and we document it, and then we can see trends. Was this just an anomaly, or has the same tech done it 3 times this month? And it's an education point to be followed up on. Yeah. So having that proactive, open collaboration and communication with your OR, educators, managers, leads, charge nurses, whoever it may be that's your point of contact, bringing that data forward in a constructive, collaborative way consistently can just open up that conversation in a different way. So it's not just about, we got you, we're tired of you pointing the finger at us. That's not productive. But setting up monthly, meetings to say, this is what we've seen. This is where the opportunities are. How do we work together to make this better? Can we come do education? Can you guys come, emphasize to our staff the importance of having every single instrument in the tray and, those kinds of things. So it's about I think the documentation is key, tracking it, having information and data so that we move past the feelings of it's all the time or it's, too much, to say this is what it actually is, and then work to correct it. And the other piece I would always advocate for is not only working with your OR, but work with your risk management team, work with your infection prevention team, your employee safety team. Those are all invested parties that should be aware of some of these issues too, that can help drive process improvement, education, training, working it into orientations, and more extensive communication throughout the organization for awareness.
Yeah, that's really great response. bringing in those other departments like infection, you mentioned risk management. They're going to be the ones when it comes time to be prepared for audits and regulatory things. They're going to be the departments that are going to be also lending a hand in some of that assistance too. So I always recommend that building up a relationship with them, in other parts of the year are super important. But yeah, great responses, guys. I think we do have a couple more questions. All right, Kristi, question for you on this one. You are most recently were a lead tech at your last facility, so you were boots on the ground, and you just happened to walk in as your decon and notice maybe somebody doesn't have that full PPE on. Can we talk about what your approach may be and why it's so important that everybody have on the proper PPE, and then just briefly discuss, what PPE is for everyone?
Yeah, well, first off, PPE is your protective personal equipment, your gown, gloves,
Right.
mask, face shield, everything that keeps you and everyone else safe from whatever is coming into decon. If I walked into that room and saw someone not wearing full PPE, I would probably say, you need to go put your gown on and your face mask, and it's not just for you, it's for everybody. You are keeping everyone safe, because if you get splashed on your scrubs and you go back out of that department wearing those dirty scrubs, you're going to get that everywhere, and that doesn't help anything.
Yeah, no, it can be. I think we've all seen it. Somebody's just doing hand wash, they'll say, so they just have gloves on, or they'll just have just a portion of their PPE. I know many times I would just walk through the decon, or you see through the pass-through window, somebody may not have on that full PPE, and it's, as leaders, it's super important to touch on that, talk about why it's so important. What we permit, we promote. So if we just allow that to happen, it's easy for that to kind of really fester, in the department, and at that point, then you have a wide variety of people doing it, right? So Shane, when you managed your facility, what kind of approaches did you take as far as like the education of donning and taking off your PPE that made things really kind of hit home for your staff on why it's so important?
Yeah, I mean, overall, the hospital does, PPE donning and doffing in orientation. Sure. But within the sterile processing department, it's a little bit different. You want to make sure that you're taking it off correctly in the right order, and also that you're putting it on before you enter into the decontamination area. If you have to go into a contaminated area to get it, then it's not really doing its job.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. At one of the last audits that I was involved with, Joint Commission brought that up. First things first, coming into decon, is where's your area to set up initially, and the further you walk into decon, the less efficient that's going to be. If you're just walking, 20 steps into decon before you put your mask and gloves on, you've touched all kinds of stuff, and you've kind of opened yourself up to kind of, a lot of problematic areas. But Mark, can you talk a little bit about PPE, again, why it's so important that everyone have all the elements to their PPE, and then in your experience, what are some approaches that you took to make sure that ongoing education was met? If you did have employees that struggled with adhering to policy, like what kind of approaches would you take to kind of get everybody on the right path?
Yeah, so first and foremost, you got to do the education and training at the beginning to make people understand the logic and the reasoning of why, safety for yourself, safety for others, safety for your family. You don't want to bring things home from work that you don't need to. There's contaminants all over that department that are a risk and can be spread easily. So I think that's first and foremost, the initial education. And then two, it's about that ongoing policy review. So just as we review how we load a sterilizer, things like that, PPE policies have to be reviewed, updated accordingly to standards. Make sure you have all the right PPE available for the people in that area, and then just ongoing monitoring compliance and promoting an environment of, accountability amongst peers. As a leader, you can't be back there 24/7 watching to make sure people are doing the right thing, but you want an environment where people encourage others to comply with that, to keep everybody safe, and that they value their coworkers enough to say something about putting the right gloves on, putting a mask on or an eye shield on when you're working with water and detergents, things like that. So I think it's just about those frequent reminders, making it a topic, doing those policy reviews annually at a minimum, and including that. Does all go a long way towards just refreshing and reminding people not to be comfortable around these things that they're seeing every day that are actually really good.
Yeah, no, it's a super important piece to decon, right? It's the first thing you should be doing is putting on your PPE in its entirety. I really appreciate that there's policies around this, because it made things so much easier when you orient new hires. We all went through COVID, and because we practice these PPE approaches, those are the things that keep us safe. So when we were working on, instruments that potentially were used on COVID patients or any like harmful diseases, we're already prepared. This is stuff that we've been ready for a long time. So, it's really nice that there's an industry where there's a standard for this. And I think it's super important. I think we all kind of discussed ongoing education is critical for this. Maintain, as your facility grows or you have new hires, you want to make sure everybody gets that initial education, and then really drive that home from then on. But great responses. All right, everyone, that's about it for today. Thank you for talking to us today about PPE, the importance of staying consistent with doffing your PPE, the appropriate approaches for all that, and why it's so important. We also discussed quality events today. It's very important to have policies and let your leads, supervisors, managers really know what the full processes are for those. That way, as a collaboration with the OR, those things can be efficiently monitored. Really appreciate your guys' feedback today. Shane, Kristi, Mark, we'd love to have you guys back again. I hope you guys all had a great 4th of July, and we will see you guys next time.